When you build dashboards and reports for a living, here's how it typically starts. This one's for those folks out there who are doing stuff in Excel. And there's nothing wrong with doing your reporting in Excel. It's the most popular tool by a long shot for it. So typically, I get an email, I go in, and somebody just has a CSV. They're tracking their performance metrics. It's usually badly formatted. A lot of the metrics tend to be a little unusable or vanity metric. And so this all starts by looking through what they're tracking and then having a very frank discussion about why, who's using the metrics, what decisions do they inform. I'm not somebody who thinks you should never use vanity metrics. In fact, I think they can be very important. They can be used to motivate people, to encourage people, just as a way to steer the conversation. But there does have to be some sort of reason to include them in there. And they certainly can't be detrimental or confusing. Now at this stage, I typically tell people, look, we can't really get any useful insights here until we, at the bare minimum, have last month's data and data for the same period last year. But ideally, we want to have that data being tracked back as far as we can get it. We want that historical data. And then, of course, we have to update the layout and formatting of this so that we can track it over time more easily. The simple way to think about this is just copy pasting this table. And instead of a normal paste, you're just going to right-click, paste special, and transpose it. That's essentially going to turn all of our rows into columns. And then we just add in a date, and every month, every quarter, however often we're tracking this, we just add in another entry and add each of our metrics. If you have stuff that's being tracked in a weird format, like with text and numbers together, you need to obviously clean all that up. The metrics need to include metrics, and the dimensions need to include text. Can't have any variance, can't have any merged fields, can't have anything weird. We're just talking columns, consistent values. Of course, we also want to turn this into a table format, so we're just going to highlight the whole thing, go to the Insert tab, hit Table, make sure you have My Table has headers selected if you do have headers. Hit OK. Voila, we've got a table, and of course, under table name, give it a nice name that's easy to reference. And then, of course, start filling it in with other dates so that you have more data here to work with. I don't really worry too much about how this table's formatted because we're almost never going to be presenting this data in table format. We're going to be presenting it as visuals, standalone KPIs that are typically in text boxes or in other formats. Now, I will typically do a little exploratory analysis on this using pivot tables. So if we think of this as our, like our raw data table, we might add another sheet that's kind of our pivot table sheet or our data processing sheet. And of course, because we've named our table, we can just drop in pivot tables here really easily. Just type in our table name, pull our date, pull in whatever metrics we want, look at aggregations, look how they change over time, all that kind of stuff. This is just at the early stages here. I'm just trying to get a loose familiarity with what we have, what it looks like, maybe find out if there's any big issues in how the data's been entered, anything that doesn't make sense, that sort of stuff. It's just good to know that right up front. Now, simultaneously at this point, I want to start exploring branding. Does the client have a brand style guide? If not, do they have branding on their website or branding in a PowerPoint? This is where we're going to get some of our inspiration for design, layout, style. We're just trying to get a feel for who we're working with here. And it's going to have a big influence on how we present the data down the road. If they're already presenting this data in a PowerPoint or somewhere else, you definitely want to get a hold of that. You want to see what their current reporting looks like. You're probably not going to want to duplicate it, but you at least want to know where they're coming from. And then this is the stage where I'm literally going pen, paper, and I'm starting to literally write or wireframe kind of a narrative around what metrics matter, what decisions they inform, how they look, etc. Sometimes I'm talking just in terms of a narrative, like a narrative pyramid. Sometimes I'm actually wireframing what's going in each section on the page. But ultimately, we're thinking about this like a story. We're thinking about it in the context of like a presentation you would give. What are you trying to communicate through to the audience? What insights matter? How much information can you give them? When will they actually understand? How much is too much? Where do we have to boil things down to a key insight, and where do we need to give lots of supplemental information? In any other context, people tend to really think through how they communicate. If you're building a PowerPoint, you really think through what you're saying, how you say it, how you lay it out, who your audience is. Are you being clear enough? Are you putting too much text on the page in front of people and overwhelming them? All that kind of stuff. And we're really trying to apply that same principle right in Excel or right in whatever visualization tool you're using. And at this stage, I think the first deliverable to the client is a wireframe of what I want to put on the page, a little bit of documentation about why I want to include it. It doesn't need to look perfect like this at all. It's typically going to look a lot more like this. We might do a few rounds of adjustment, get a clear sense of the direction we're going, and then it's all about starting to build out that first version and getting some real data connected into it. Anyway, that's how I start projects. I'll go more into the next steps later on if there's any interest in this topic. Oh, and of course, if you want the templates like the one you see behind me, I send them out on the newsletter for free to help people learn how all the stuff works in Excel. There's a link in my bio, and if you don't see the link, you can just click on my YouTube link and then get the link from YouTube. Oh, and we also have a Patreon. If you're so inclined, you can hop on the Patreon. The link's in the same place. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.